everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I've had the luxury of knowing AddieRose Mayer, our guest speaker, for about over a year and a half. That's when I started at the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. A little bit about AddieRose. She was born and raised in New England. She has her bachelor's from Bates College. She has her master's in public health from San Francisco State College, San Francisco State University here. She started at PCRC as the mediation case manager, and then over the years she was promoted to the director, where she is now the director of our core programs within PCRC. That department is the umbrella of our mediation, our facilitation, and our trainings. AddieRose has always, throughout her career, she's always focused on cross-cultural communication and a collaborative problem-solving efforts. So after a little bit about her, I'm going to have her come up and give you more details about her.
Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be here. I mean, I wouldn't have minded like an hour later, but
Yeah.
we do what we need to do, right? And Ramiro's gonna actually pass out some brochures and my business card. I didn't realize he was such a new member, or I'd probably make fun of him a little bit more, but I guess since he's new to the group, I'll give him a little bit of a break. But you're gonna, we'll actually utilize this as a little bit of a handout as well. And I have my cell phone because there's no clock here and I'm not wearing a watch, but I promise I'm not texting or playing little games over here. It's just to help me stay on track. So, as Ramiro said, I work at the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center, also known as PCRC often, referred to in San Mateo County. And just a show of hands, a quick straw poll, who here has heard of PCRC before today? Anybody? We have one, couple people, maybe a little bit. Anybody remember how or what you heard about PCRC?
I heard that Romero worked for them.
Yes, he's a little bit famous, so that's our claim to fame over there. Good thing we got him a year and a half ago, or else, we might not have anything to stand for. Anybody else?
Your sister outfit in Santa Clara County did some work for them. So I kind of know what you do a little bit, but I still want to hear what everything.
The mediation programs down in Santa Clara run through Project Sentinel?
I forget, it's been a year or two. So.
Great, okay.
Nancy is the boss down there. Nancy, somebody.
Yeah, you should know the amount.
Anyway,
yeah, run for mediation services. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center started out in the mid-'80s. And it started out with some residents who noticed conflict in their neighborhood. And they were concerned, and they said, we've been hearing in the newspaper and in other places that there's this tool called community mediation, where neighbors help neighbors, and we want to learn about that. So they contacted community boards in San Francisco, which was the first community mediation program in the country, and they said, can you train us on how to help our neighbors get along better? Because we don't want to live in neighborhoods where people are fighting with each other over trees and fences and driveways and where they're parking and barking dogs. We think that we can do better than that as a neighborhood. So they got some training and they came back to their neighborhoods and they actually went around with clipboards and knocked on doors and said, hi, Mr. Smith. I heard that you and Ms. Garcia next door are having a conflict. I live in the neighborhood. I care about the neighborhood. And I'd like to offer some support. Are you interested? And from there, we've grown into an agency that supports the entire county, that we serve hundreds of people per year, and we do far more than just mediation. But the foundation of all of our programs are rooted in mediation, process development, and the skills that you use in mediation, and the philosophy and approach of it. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means. And I came to PCRC about 6 years ago, and I had a background in doing a lot of informal mediation, utilizing all of the skills you use in mediation, but in slightly different processes. I was working in adult immigrant education groups, doing facilitation and helping people work across difference. I was doing substance abuse prevention education, customized interventions, And I was still a little bit on the fence about whether this idea of neutrality was really good or whether it was a little bit of a cop-out, right? Like, I don't want to stand behind something, so I'm just going to say, well, I'm neutral, right? And we all know as humans, we're never really neutral. Thank goodness we have brains and we get to think all the time and analyze, right? And through my journey, as one of my mentors would say, I drank the Kool-Aid and I learned about this idea of leading from behind, facilitating processes in a way that empower people to come up with their own solutions. Why? Simple. Because people know their lives far better than you or I ever could, right? So I'm going to invite you to start out with to tell me a little bit more about yourself. It won't take too long. Jim actually shared with me this morning that as much time as you spend together, you don't always know the details about each other's lives because you do, because people are busy and multifaceted, right? So I'm just going to move over here actually. My little makeshift. Okay. Is that better? Okay. So I invite you to tell me just what your name is, either your profession or something you're passionate about, if that's not what you want to talk about. Not everybody, I love to talk about my job, obviously. I'm here spending the day with you, but not everybody feels that way. And one word you think of that comes to mind when you hear the word conflict. What's just one word. This is a very brief get to know you exercise. Just one word, okay? And you can start, anybody can start, whoever feels the, yes.
Violence.
Violence, and your name and profession or passion?
What's that?
Your name
your
and
name and
some,
profession?
your profession?
Ken. My name's Ken.
Hi, Ken.
And profession's commercial real estate broker.
Commercial real estate, okay. Violence. Okay. You can just yell out, no need for hands. Just don't, yell over each other.
Disagreement. Unnecessary.
Unnecessary. Okay, we're gonna skip the intro part. 'Cause
Yeah. Stress. Yeah.
I'm having paralysis. Who can help me spell? There's this thing that happens up here.
MECESSAR.
MECES. Oh, okay, thank you. Anybody ever written on a big chartboard before?
Yeah.
This thing happens where sometimes you just get blank. So we always do this thing, we do this little spell check. So I reserve the right to misspell, and I invite you to practice your neutrality and not judging me. It happens when I get a little
You're on the
nervous.
spotlight, you're under stress.
You're under stress.
Things like spelling are the least important thing in the
That's
world.
right,
Yeah.
and that's why we cool down when we have a
But you're
conflict.
not in conflict with us, really. You don't
Oh,
have to
okay.
be like
But
that.
high emotion sometimes
I
mimics
can
that,
help you, I can
right?
help you.
Back on topic, anger.
Thank you.
2 for stress. Stress.
Termination,
Oh, can you tell me a little more about termination?
firing,
Job loss.
Okay.
yeah, job loss,
Okay. Sometimes
Chaos.
termination could be like a relation, it could be all sorts of relationships.
oh, yeah.
Chaos.
All right. What else?
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
That's 2.
Okay. Anything else? Emotional. All right, this is a pretty hearty list. Any last burning words that you want to get up here? Okay. So when you look at this list, violence, disagreement, unnecessary, anger, stress, termination or job loss, chaos, overwhelm, emotional, what do you notice? What do these words have in common with one another?
They're all negative.
They're all negative. They're things that we often want to avoid or run from, right? So at PCRC, our approach is and has always been that we believe in something called conflict transformation, which is that conflict is an opportunity. What might it be an opportunity for that might be less negative?
Learn.
To learn
Dialogue.
about, what would you
The other individual that you're having conflict with.
Yeah, to learn about others. I think I heard something over here.
Dialogue.
For dialogue. And what's the benefit of dialogue? Why is that?
Resolution.
Possible resolution?
Possible resolution.
Understanding?
Yeah, increased understanding of others.
Empathy.
Empathy. And how come, it may sound a little bit obvious, but how come empathy matters?
Well, it's similar to what you were just saying. I was gonna,
Yeah.
how come that matters?
Yeah.
Oh, empathy matters.
Yeah.
Right, compassion is how you turn that into an opportunity.
Absolutely. Right, you're identifying some skills that are used to actually be able to make conflict an opportunity. Anyone else? Okay, so that's the framework of our agency and all the work that we do, is this idea that conflict is an opportunity. It is inevitable. We are not conflict eradicators. That is not our goal. Why? Because difference is a beautiful and powerful thing, and the idea is to harness the power of difference and turn it into something positive. Self-learning, learning of others, increased empathy, and then the result of that, the outcome of that is creative problem solving and solutions that we could never have thought of on our own before we did that work. And we're going to talk in a little bit about what that actually looks like. What are some examples of that in our programs? So PCRC, that's kind of our belief, and we do this through three main focus areas: on empowering youth, strengthening families, and engaging communities. And all of those programs with those focus areas are built upon mediation, facilitation, and training skills. And those are the programs that I have the honor of running throughout the county. We're going to focus today more on the mediation side. What does mediation look like? So who here has participated in, no, that's the wrong question, sorry. Mediation is very confidential. Never ask a group of people who's been in mediation. Who here has heard of mediation? Does anybody want to, has anyone had a personal experience that they are comfortable and interested in sharing? Yeah.
Well, in my business, all the time, we use mediation because we have landlords and tenants at each other's throat. That's why I came up with violence, because sometimes it looks like that, although I haven't seen anybody actually punch each other out, but they come close.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about millions of dollars, commercial buildings, and they can be, the people can be very conflict oriented.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they are looking for a conflict.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. How come? How come do you think they're looking for conflict?
Well, because they're half crazy to begin with. You know, but maybe they just work hard and they're stressed.
Yeah.
And they have a business that's under stress. So like in 07, 08, 09, guys were business owners that were going under were accusing the landlords who had just tripled the rent and going to have to lay off 100 employees.
Yeah.
So it's big stakes.
Yeah, big stakes. And we hear those same kinds of conflicts around landlord tenants. Not
Now it's
commercial,
residential. Yeah.
Yeah, residential, right? Especially, I mean, in the Bay Area, there's tons of cases like that, and we mediate those cases. Yeah, absolutely. And so, basically, mediation is this idea. So there's a spectrum of mediation. So we have different people in here. Some are practitioners. Some do more maybe organizational conflict resolution. I might have snuck a little peek at someone's business card, looking in the back. And we focus on kind of community, and that includes workplaces, and includes where people live, and we use a facilitative model. So what that means is that we are not doing legal mediation. We are helping people talk about what's going on, de-escalating the conflict, and helping them come up with their own solutions to their problems. Again, because our philosophy is that at the end of the day, people are experts in their own lives, and we can guide them through a process to share that with one another. But our solutions are never going to be as successful as their solutions, right? And lucky for us, that hunch is actually proven to be accurate. So we have 80% success rate of resolution within our mediations, and we have 95% of people who uphold their agreements. So 95% of the solutions that people develop in the mediations are upheld when we follow up. Is that a question?
Are you not, is that internally that research, that data, or is that in general mediation and the field has discovered that 95%?
So in the field, it's usually 80 to 85. Our rates are 95. So I can brag a little. We have a little bit of a higher success rate. And I think, I'm sure there's a lot of factors. I joke about us bragging, but there's a lot of different factors, different types of mediation and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Could you give us a practical example of a case you're working on?
absolutely. If you don't mind, I'm just going to tell you a couple more things first. I'm going to put over here a little parking lot and put example. A parking lot is a facilitation tool for those of you who may not know. That means that we have to get to this by the end of my talk. And actually I have a bunch of examples I wanted to share with you. So our mediation rates are about on par, a little bit higher than the national averages. And we mediate almost any kind of dispute, except, again, it's facilitated mediation, so we're not lawyers and we're not going to do legal rulings. So what that means is we don't do divorce mediation, although we just don't determine the agreements of divorce, but we oftentimes are mediating with parents who are divorced and want to talk about how to co-parent, how to better deal with their visitation schedules, kind of the logistical and emotional side of it. We just wouldn't determine, custody or equity splitting, that kind of stuff. We don't mediate domestic violence cases because we're not therapists, and that's a very specific skill set you need to have to be able to not or continue to harm somebody in a situation like that. If there's active substance abuse, active current substance abuse and use at time of mediation, we also would not mediate that. And other than that, we pretty much mediate any case that people want to do facilitated mediation. The nice thing about it is that you can do mediation and do any other process you want. So you can be in the courts and parallel with mediation. So you don't have to give up your right to access the law in order to do mediation, right? So we believe in appropriate dispute resolution, not alternative. That means there's a different need, a different process you need for different types of disputes, and we encourage all of them. So some examples, what does that look like? So we recently, let's see, this year I can give a bunch of examples. One, we referred a case through HSA, foster parents who were thinking about giving up their foster daughter. They were struggling too much. The parents were not talking to each other. The 13-year-old foster daughter was not talking to the parents. And they said, we're done. We're done with this. She had been with them for about 5 years, and they were considering adoption, and then they just said, you know what? They started to have marital problems, honestly, and they weren't communicating with one another. When that happened, guess what? 3 people not talking to each other in a home. So through our mediation processes and a series of 2 mediations, they were able to come up with a bunch of communication agreements in their home, start talking to one another again. And actually, this case closed about 8 months ago, and we just talked to last week to HSA, and they have committed to another year of foster care and are starting the adoption process. Yes?
So a couple quick questions.
Sure.
Do you have other experts, if there's substance abuse, then you have somebody that you normally go to and bring them in, or do you hand it off? How do you do that?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So a lot of cases that come to us aren't necessarily appropriate for mediation, right? And so what we do is we build relationships with other service providers in the county, and we do warm handoffs for those situations.
Yeah, handoffs.
Yeah, so each one's different. Sometimes it's as simple as giving somebody another phone number, but typically it's hard for people to ask for support, right? And so once they've done that, you don't want to create additional barriers for people to access what they actually need. So oftentimes we have a contact at a place, we'll call them and have them reach out to the individual, or we'll say, call at this time at this date and you can expect to get this person on the phone, which will help, or go in at this time and ask for this person, tell them that PCRC sent you.
Now, the term mediation, now, actually, you have them in a room, like the three parties together. Do you separate them in a separate room and you talk to them? And do you ever come up and say, okay, my decision is, I mean, because the word mediation means, you know, I mean, is it like a
It's not
court type of
arbitration.
thing?
It's not arbitration.
But do you just get
Binding.
together with them and, I mean, how does it actually function, you know? I mean,
Yeah, great question. So we use what we call facilitative, which also means that we don't do that what you're describing is kind of shuttle mediation, right?
Right.
And we're also, our mediators are not making decisions for others. They're not making recommendations even. So we believe that the best work happens when the 2 people or the 5 people or sometimes 50 people are in a room together to deal with for us to guide them through a process where they can talk to each other about the problem and come up with their own solution.
okay, so you're a facilitator, basically, right?
We are, yes, we
Okay.
use, that's right. Facilitative mediation is
Right.
basically a
Okay,
facilitator.
all right.
But that being said, people who are really in conflict and people who've been, some folks have had conflict for 20 years before they get help, right? Or support. They're not ready to sit in a room with the person that they're angry at, right? And that might lead to violence.
That's called a marriage, right?
Sometimes.
Who does the mediation? Who are you mediating?
So our mediators are all skilled certified mediators in the state of California. So there's actually some money that comes through the court system that gets funneled back into community mediation programs, and it's heavily regulated how the training people have to be able to practice mediation. So our mediators for our community, our basic programs, are primarily trained and certified volunteers, community members. Our philosophy is strengthening communities from within, right? And just a minute, I'll get to you, yeah. And then we have, for the more complex cases, we'll do multi-parties, we'll do in really complex workplace where there's incredible power imbalances, then we primarily have staff who are really, kind of seasoned mediators. But our volunteer mediators come from all professions. A lot of lawyers, many of them say that they're lawyers in recovery. Not my term, I'm not a lawyer, but there are lawyers in the room and might
Yeah, we have at least 2 lawyers
at
here.
least 2 lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay. So people say.
And we have a bunch of pseudo lawyers.
The rest are pseudo-lawyers.
That's me in my family. Like, what are you, the lawyer?
We also have people that talk a lot too.
Very good.
Questions you might want to.
That was good.
Yeah. What are you referring to?
Yes, okay, great. So I have a
resemble that
request, and then I'm
one
gonna come, I haven't forgot back, we have 2 questions back here, but first I had a request to talk about what's the difference between mediation and arbitration. Would you like to share? I'm happy to, but
Well,
I'm standing here, okay. So arbitration is a process it's a legal process, right? In which typically you have somebody who is making a decision or a recommendation. They hear both sides of a situation or multiple sides of a situation, and they say, based on the evidence and what I've heard, my recommendation or my decision is this is how you're going to resolve it. And in mediation, we say, you know what, we're going to take you through step by step. So people start out by telling the mediator. Then we coach them on how to actually talk to each other about it. And then we don't actually get to coming up with solutions until usually the very end of the mediation. So mediations last 3 hours and up to 3 sessions. And the solutions don't come usually till the very last 45 minutes. Why? Because the problem people come into the room with is pretty much never the problem that they really need a solution for. And that's why everything they've tried hasn't worked yet. Because the presenting problem is not the underlying problem, right? So we're not making recommendations on how to resolve it. We're just helping people figure out what actually is the problem. And then when people really figure out the problem, solutions are not hard for people to come up with, right? You only need a third person to tell you how to resolve it if you're in an adversarial process where you're not interested in looking at the problem together. Yeah. So I had 2 questions, and I know I'm starting to run out of time, so we'll get these questions answered and see if we have time for more.
What's your funding source?
Okay, well, you can talk to Amir about that because he's in charge of our development at a later date. But so for our mediation programs, our main funding source is DERPA, which is the tax that comes through the court system and gets funneled back into the community mediation programs. And it comes from the state and gets given to the county and then the county is the one who administers it to us. So we have the county court system. We also, for our mediation services, have, actually for our whole agency, we contract with 13 cities in the county. And those contracts help us keep our doors open. And also, it gives a message to residents that your city cares about people getting along and utilizing these services. And so as a result, we have very nominal fees for our mediation services, primarily because people show up if they put money down. But even the nominal fee is something, and so the city's contract subsidizes that so that we can offer residents in those cities even reduced. Yeah, thank you.
So-
We had a question back
No,
here,
no,
and then
no,
we'll come
back
to you.
there, okay.
It got answered already, thank
Oh,
you.
perfect, okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah, after you have a meeting of the minds of people, shake hands, and they have a solution, do you help them sort of document, I don't mean in a legal sense, but I mean, you do need to kind of put it on paper, don't you?
Absolutely.
And is there any enforcement? What is the enforcement? Maybe just morals? I mean, obligation to keep it kind of like, it's not binding arbitration. I know that. It's not like you don't have the court behind it. Or maybe you do have the court. I don't know. So that's a question.
Yeah, great question. So we do a written agreement. The mediators write up an agreement, and then it's approved by the folks in the room. We do a lot of work around making sure it's a balanced agreement, right? So you don't leave with one party committing to 752 things and the other party saying, thank you, goodbye, right? You have to have some sort of balance there. And then we determine in the room a follow-up date. And the follow-up date is based on what the agreement is. So, some conflicts, the agreement is going to go for another year. So then we would follow up in a year. For some people, in the next 2 weeks, they're going to finish their agreement. So we would follow up in 2 weeks. It is a good faith agreement, so it's not legally binding. Although some people decide afterwards to take it to the court and get it, make it a legal document. But really what binds people is simply that they came up with the solutions themselves and they just spent 3 hours with relationship building with folks in a way that they have an increased understanding of what they're going through and a desire to, follow through with what they're saying, what they said they would do. Yeah.
If you took a look at your caseload, what would you say are the top 3 sources of the conflicts that brings them to you, if you could do that?
So the number one source, if you go to really underline, is misunderstanding and assumptions. Now, that might not have been what you questioned. Do you want to know more like who's involved, or is that,
I
yeah?
want you to
Yeah.
answer the question.
Yeah. Thanks. So, really misunderstanding and people making assumptions about one another. And that's in workplaces, that's in landlord-tenant situations, that's in business cases that we do with small businesses, that's in neighbors. Someone gets an idea in their head, they misunderstand a situation, and that carries with them sometimes for 20, 25 years.
Yeah, but is it like barking dogs, or is it, what's the source of the misunderstanding or the problem?
Even the barking dog cases, most of the time, the issue is not the barking dog. The barking dog is something, because think about it, if your neighbor has a barking dog and you're annoyed and you don't have any issues with your neighbor, you probably are going to go talk to your neighbor. I mean, most simple conflicts people can resolve on their own, right? And it's the complicated ones that, so then maybe you go over to the neighbor and there's an exchange and there's a misunderstanding that happens in that exchange. You've made assumption about somebody. However, yes, with the presenting problem, lots of barking dogs, fence issues, tons of tree issues.
Tree?
Yes.
Okay.
So like if your tree is coming over to my yard and then it's hurting my fence and whose responsibility is it, right? That's on the community levels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on the neighbor levels. We have all sorts of cases around landlord tenants. We have all sorts of cases, a lot of workplace cases. One person gets promoted over, someone used to be colleagues and now that person got a promotion. This person, the relationship is broken down. How do you address those kinds of issues?
You mean they come to you and not go to their own HR person in the company?
Typically, the HR person will come to us after.
Fire the
because-
HR person. Oh, sorry.
He was one.
Yeah, I know, get rid of them. Man, they can't, they go outside, God. Sorry.
I think my time has come to an end, if I'm correct, and so Do I have one more question?
Last question, last question.
Last question, can you give us some of the dirt that you were gonna dish earlier?
You know, I have my phone, I have my card there, so you just give me a call. Thank you so much for having me here today. Please,
Very
feel free
good.
to contact me for anything. I'd
Very
love to
good.
hear from any of you or ideas you have about ways that we can work together, get referrals between us, that kind of work.
So if we have a problem, we might call you and you can come in and resolve it?
Yeah.
All right.
Problem with Mike, you say with Mike, we never have problems with Mike, do we? Just
But remember, it's not free.
Okay.
I know, I understand, yeah.
Oh, that's
Nothing
right.
is
And
free.
Ramiro will tell you about our.
Oh,
Nothing
there
is
are
free.
fees involved.
Yes,
Oh,
I said
okay.
that already.
Oh,
You missed that point.
I missed it, yeah.
Ben, did you really want to be in charge?